We've been hearing the story of the sage Vitavya. Eventually he sat down in meditation, rested in the supreme consciousness until his body fell away or returned to the elements. I suggested that we take the sense of finality and the positivity of his experience, and also the total lack of compromise with which he established himself in this awareness. This is what we can take from this story. But Rama asks this question. Rama asked, "Lord, why do we not see many of these liberated sages traversing the sky now?" Which seems like a peculiar question to ask after the story of Vitavya. So we have to assume that Vitavya was one of these sages that could fly through the sky, rather like Vasistha is supposed to do. Vasistha replied, "Flying in the sky and other powers are natural to some beings, O Ram. The extraordinary qualities and faculties which are observed in this world are natural to those beings, not to the sages of self-knowledge." And this is an important point. If you're a spiritual seeker, it's very difficult not to be impressed by stories of supernormal powers. You're bound to come across them at some point, especially if you look into the Indian traditions. Within the tradition of yoga, there's supposed to be so many psychic and physical powers available. We've got the Siddhis. Within Buddhism, the list of supernormal powers are methodically listed, as most things are in Buddhism. You acquire the understanding at some point that a person who's in touch with the absolute consciousness must surely be capable of supernormal powers. And you keep looking for little signs in terms of their powers. If a teacher's got a particular charisma, then you'll accept that in the meantime until they manifest some supernormal power. This is a complete dead end. It's a spiritual dead end. In terms of Star Wars, you've given in to the dark side of the Force. To be caught up with supernormal powers, if you're interested in that thing, that's fine. Go and pursue it, but it's got nothing to do with what's being spoken of here. You might as well go and learn the violin. In fact, learning the violin, inquiring into the nature of music, is more spiritually rewarding and more likely to lead you somewhere than inquiring into supernormal powers. Supernatural faculties, like flying in the air, are developed by even those who are devoid of self-knowledge or liberation, by the utilization of certain substances or by certain practices. All this does not interest a man of self-knowledge who is utterly content in himself. They who, in pursuit of pleasures, acquire these powers tainted by ignorance are surely full of ignorance. The sages of self-knowledge do not adopt such a course. It's a wonderfully alluring thing. It's like becoming a superhero, isn't it? I think the whole superhero phenomenon, which is very popular nowadays, taps into this longing. It's a longing for transcendence in physical terms. I don't know about you, but I've often had dreams of flying. And it sounds like a great thing, doesn't it, flying? But in my dreams, I tend to be aware of how far the ground is below me whenever I'm flying. And they tend to be quite anxious dreams. Although that probably says quite a lot about me. But I think if I was flying, I would be tending to, that would be my main concern, is how far away the ground is, rather than just getting on with the flying. Whether one is a knower of truth or ignorant of it, powers like flying in the air accrue to one who engages himself in some practices. This might diminish the credibility of the Yoga Vasistha. especially if you're of a scientific disposition. The assumption is that it is possible to fly through the air. Although Rama is asking why you don't see much of it anymore, which is a question we could ask now, because we would have assumed that in Rama's time there were sages flying all over the place. But apparently not. Apparently Rama hadn't seen many of these sages. If he'd seen any of them at all, it was only hearsay. It was all only hearsay in Rama's time. So you wonder whether it was such a possibility after all. So if you're in a scientific mode, you can dismiss this. But if you feel that reality has got a magical quality, which I feel it has, I think reality has got a magical quality. Personally, I am open to the possibility of anything. But when it comes to supernormal powers, psychic abilities, I slip into scientific mode, because one thing we cannot dispute is human gullibility, how easily we are taken in. If you're a conjurer or an illusionist, you know this. It's so easy to deceive people. It's so easy to give a certain impression, and it's so easy to give the impression of psychic or supernormal abilities. In the West, we have some great entertainers who, if they wished, they could be promoting themselves as real magicians and all the rest of it, but they don't. They only promote themselves as entertainers. And they have tremendous powers of illusion, powers of deception, hypnotism, and all the rest of it. But the sage of self-knowledge has no desire to acquire these. These practices bestow their fruit on anyone, for such is their nature. Poison kills all, wine intoxicates all. Even so, these practices bring about the ability to fly, etc. But they who have attained the supreme self-knowledge are not interested in them, O Ram. They are gained only by those who are full of desires, but the sage is free from the least desire for anything. Self-knowledge is the greatest gain. Well, it seems a wee bit boring compared to supernormal powers, doesn't it? But it's not. Self-knowledge is the greatest magic of all. How does the sage of self-knowledge entertain any desire for anything else? In the case of Vitahavya, however, he did not desire these powers. They sought him unsought. So we weren't told, but it seems that Vitahavya was one of these saints who happened to have these powers.